I am Coach Sess, motivated and determined, and you are listening to Words with a Mad Coach. This is your favorite Mad Coach, Coach Sess. We are officially in 2018 after a long, nice and needed break and rest for everyone. It's time to start it all over again, get back to the grind, and get these fights on, win some championships, make a name for yourself. In recent weeks, I've had the opportunity to sit back and catch a lot of shows locally as well as televised, and do some homework. And the most recent show that I like to mention is the Holly Holm Cyborg fight. I was a little interested into knowing what was the state of women's MMA. Now, we know we have Invicta, and Invicta has been the flagship for women's MMA for quite some time now. But what I wanted to know is where was women's MMA in a man's world? So I took a look at the three major promotions right now. I guess if you could look at it that way, the UFC, Bellator, and One Championship. And what I noticed was that since Ronda Rousey's entrance into the UFC, women have headlined a UFC event 18 times. And what was amazing was that in 2017, women headlined the show 6 times in 1 year. And Bellator actually had 2 events where women headlined the event, and so did One Championship. Now, the difference being is that Bellator basically has Julia Budd, who is their face for the women's division, whereas the UFC tends to have Nunez, Holly Holm, Cyborg, Shevchenko, even Thug Namajunas, and even some of the women who don't hold titles like Van Zandt. They're just names that can headline a card. Katsungano, Joanna Champion, it's just women jumping off the top of my brain. And I have to struggle to do that for One Championship and the Bellator. The thing that, when I contrast that, what's going on in the UFC and Bellator and One Championship, makes me look back in 2017 at North Carolina MMA, because that is somewhat my focus. I did not see this year where we had a women's title defended or attained. Now, I could be wrong, all right, but we only had basically 4 promotions, and I tried to make sure that I did my homework, and I don't remember a championship for the women in North Carolina. Now, I know we may have had some North Carolinians go outside of the state and fight for a title, because I know Samantha Seth, she headlined a card in Virginia, and that was a women's title. Now, what I'm looking for is, where is the North Carolina representation for women's MMA? When I look through mixedmartialarts.com, I look through Tapology, you notice that as far as the women's division, it's relatively small, pro and amateur combined. It's roughly about 15 names listed, and I'm pretty sure it's more than that. It's just that if they're not fighting in state, they don't list them under the North Carolina umbrella. So I want to know, where is the representation for women's MMA in North Carolina. I just want to know where's Fight Lab's women's champion. We just started having pro titles for the men, and we've always had the amateur titles for the men. I just don't remember anything for the women. So where you at, Fight Lab? Where are our women's championships and representation? Because I think that's going to help build up that division if they have something to attain the way the men do. If there's opportunities for the men, there should be opportunities for the women, and that'll improve that division and improve MMA overall. Because I think if you have women headlining in the UFC and people tend to watch the UFC, that becomes the flagship, that becomes the model that everyone, the standard bearer that everyone kind of holds in high regard. And that's what they want to see, because that's what they think this is. When they go to your events, when they go to Battle in the South, Fight Lab, Next Level Fight Club, or any other promotion, that's what they think they're going to see, especially your lay participants. Now the diehards, we know what we're in for. We'll go to a backyard fight, a bar fight, if we think good mixed martial arts is going to be there. But the lay person needs a little bit of presentation, and they need to have a background story to understand, like, why are they fighting? So maybe there should be a tournament. I wouldn't really want to see a number one and a number two, because we really don't have a number one and a number two. When you can lump sum all of your pros and amateurs into one category, I think that what needs to happen is there needs to be some type of separation. And the only way to do that is give the women some type of incentive, like with a tournament done over a couple of months. Let's weed out, this thing of, putting in 3-1s, taking on debuting fighters. Let's weed out some of that and put some good matchups. The same way you do it with the Ultimate Fighter, where they have a program over a couple of months to determine who's going to be the champion. I did enjoy the Ultimate Fighter finale, even though it only got about 500,000 views as far as the UFC that night. That's because Bellator went head to head with them, and they got about 500 views. And the good news about that is that both cards were headlined by women. So women's MMA overall still did about 1 million views that night. So that's still exciting. That's a good thing. You're doing 1 million views for TV, you're going to be on the air. So women's MMA is hot. It's subtle. The UFC does a better job of building names and personalities than most of the other companies, but it's still showing that it's a focus. And I think if you give it a chance, that people will turn out for it. I have seen a lot of men come out and say, hey, watch this fight or watch this event, because the women are more technical. The women fight harder. There's more emotion. There's more to the story with the women. Even when you really don't know them, I tend to believe that some of the guys that I'm listening to are getting it right. Paris Aries Artist is one. He was a big fan of women's MMA before it made my radar, and he made me a believer. I think that you're starting to see where you don't need the one name. If you think about boxing, you always had that, you had Christy Martin, you had Layla Ali, you always had that one name. Whereas what you're seeing now is you have multiple names, and that's what's going to give it some credibility. And it's also going to turn it into a market that people want to follow, because I always notice, like, you go to these shows and these promoters are trying to sell paraphernalia. Okay, it's one thing when you're out there selling gloves and fight gear and all that stuff, but to be honest, most of that stuff is geared toward men. I mean, most women don't go to shows and pick up MMA gloves, But as far as your paraphernalia, your apparel rather, if you've got more women fighters, women are gonna buy clothing, and you have apparel that is geared toward women, and you got women's championships on the line. You know, the women are inclined to show up to the event, inclined to buy the apparel because they feel a part of the event. That's just my 2 cents on it. Now, I could be completely wrong because I'm not a promoter. I mean, you guys have been doing this for a long time, but I think I have some sound ideas here. If you start with a tournament, build up the interest, and crown yourself some champions, get some names out there, and then, create the merch behind it, create that push. I think you will go a long way. And I think because the fight spectrum, so to speak, for women is small, I think that's something that all you promoters could really agree upon and work together on. A lot of your male stars, you are trying to keep them to yourselves, sign them for your promotion. You only want them fighting for you, so you're going to keep them fighting. But because that community for women is so small right now, I think that the women win if all the promoters get together and support it. You literally could have a true women's regional champion, I don't want to say world champion, but you could truly have a true women's regional champion that represents all of the promotions, instead of having 4 or 5 different championships and you never headline that fighter, or you never have that fighter never defends the title. So women's MMA is hot right now. If you look at, I think ONE FC is putting on their first event of the year in January 20th, I want to say. And this headline, I believe it's a women's strawweight or bantamweight title on the line. I think if you go into the UFC, and I think they're going to start with March. I think it was Kat Zingano is headlining that card at UFC 222, I believe it was. So it's the process is starting all over again, and I would like to believe that if the big three see the picture, and of course Invicta's already doing what they're doing because they do all women. I think they have a card next weekend, January, I want to say it's the 13th, because the UFC is on the 14th. So Invicta's doing a card. And so, the only thing Invicta's missing, is just a way to get to the mainstream. I know they're on the UFC Fight Pass, but they need to open up their market, because look at who they keep turning out and sending up to the UFC, and the UFC is really benefiting from it. Now, I don't know all the inner workings. Maybe there's a kickback process going on, so they're happy with the situation as it is. But the bottom line is that women's MMA is hot right now. And it does go in cycles, because you saw this in boxing. You see this in kickboxing. And if you think about it, recently, Tiffany Van Soos fought in Glory. And I forget who she fought at the moment. But she lost her title. She headlined the event. So women's combat sports in general is headlining. And it's probably time for everybody to kind of just jump on that pony and ride it, see how far it goes. Anyway, I'm Coach Sess, and you've had words with the Mad Coach.